Hi everyone and welcome back to a new video. Today I'm going to show you how I created the first entry in my Commonplace book, which I started at almost 30, after wanting to do it for a very long time. This notebook was made by my boyfriend based on my directions, and I asked him to include a typewriter on the cover and a golden detail to reflect the style I wanted to use throughout the book, a mix of medieval, antique, romantic decorations. And you'll also see these elements come back in the first spreads. As I showed you in the previous video, in my monthly review inside my personal journal, I had included a reference to Ophelia, specifically to paintings of Ophelia, and I promised that in this video I will go deeper into that topic because I was really fascinated by this character. And as I mentioned, I didn't even know those two paintings existed, so I really wanted to explore that aspect more deeply, as well as remember who Ophelia was and trace her symbolism in art. As I said, I decided to start a commonplace book at 30, but in reality, without knowing it, this is something I've always done since I was a child. Even now, I still do the same thing. I first create a basic pencil layout to understand where everything will go, and I never start from a blank page. In this case, too, I ended up making a mistake because the photo was longer than the text, so I had to adjust things later. But it wasn't a bad thing because it pushed me to redesign the composition and create more movement on the page. In the end, the text will overlap with the image. So once I'm satisfied with the layout, I start gluing the different parts. And it's fascinating to see how these two paintings are so different and at the same time very similar. Here, as you can see, I sketched some little stars. They might look random, but they're actually used to help me understand how the elements fit on the page. And I do the same thing here, aligning everything with the text. In this case, I had sketched the decoration slightly higher, but that's fine because the sketch is exactly here for this purpose to allow adjustments later if needed. Ophelia is a tragic character in Shakespeare's Hamlet, but what fascinates me most and the reason I chose to focus on these paintings is the symbolism within them. Because Ophelia becomes a figure Shakespeare lets speak through silence and flowers, and this also reflects the Victorian interest in the language of flowers, where each flower carries a symbolic meaning. But why Victorian? Because these paintings were created between the 1800s and 1900s, so centuries after the original play was written. So every flower in these works has a hidden code. Among them, the red poppy represents the deep sleep Ophelia eventually surrenders to. And this is how the decorated spread looks. I had planned to add frames around the images to echo their outer border, but first I filled in the little stars because the page felt a bit empty. And only then I added the frames, keeping them very simple. In this box, I'm defining the theme of the entry, and I'm using a 1.6 big crystal pen with a very smooth, bold line. And I write the two categories this entry belongs to: literature and history of art, and below that I write Ophelia as the main theme. Then I add the legend with two sticker dots corresponding to the two categories. These are the two colors used in the legend. This way, when I go back through my Commonplace book, I can immediately see which category each topic belongs to. And I also added another sticker here with a slightly vintage feel. Using gouache, I then defined the title. I chose a medieval style font like I did for the monthly review because it gives me the same atmosphere. And with permanent white gouache, since I had to move Ophelia slightly lower so the text wouldn't overlap her face, a part of the letters is now missing. So here I'm restoring the missing parts of the I and the A here using the same color without diluting it so it stays opaque and solid. And I do this part quite freely, more by eye, as a way to practice letting go of perfectionism. And then I define the letters with a Pigma Micron pen to create a slightly three-dimensional effect. After that, I added these lines that radiate outward, almost like sunbeams. And now comes the writing. In the top box, I write the reference, what inspired me to choose this topic. I've known this character for a long time. I studied her in high school and I've always been fascinated by her. But the idea of using her as a topic came from something much more casual. I have very long wavy hair. I usually straighten it, but one day I let it air dry in the sun and it reminded me a lot of Ophelia's hair. And that is my reference. Nothing elevated or important, but I think it's right to include that as well. Here I write the details of the paintings. Of course, I do some research because I don't remember all the specifics, so I use Wikipedia or Google Scholar, but you can use any other source you prefer. And I decided to write on the side, slightly tilted. This is Ophelia by John Everett Millais from 1851. It's an oil on canvas and it's kept in London. For the other painting, while here I went towards the left, I go towards the right. The second painting is later from 1900s by a German artist. One interesting difference is that even though Hamlet is set in Denmark, this artist chose to depict the landscape more like the English countryside. And apparently, someone even tried to locate the exit spot, which I found really fascinating. These are just the kinds of details I didn't know before and that I want to remember. That's the whole point of a commonplace. If I had just looked this up quickly online, it wouldn't have stayed with me in the same way, because writing it down and spending time on it makes it stick. Here I also included a short summary of Ophelia's story and a reference to a possible real-life inspiration. In 1759, a young woman drowned in the river Avon, and it's believed Shakespeare may have drawn from that event. So here I have the reference and here the symbolism, and at the bottom I wrote two open questions that I can come back to in the future. Maybe if you want, I also leave them in the comments so we can reflect on them together. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed the first entry in my commonplace. I already have the next one in mind. Probably it's going to be science themed. Thank you for watching and see you soon.